John and Mia met in their second year of university at a noisy New Year's Eve party organized by their friends. John, with his enduring love of physics and mathematical equations, seemed to Mia a somewhat shy, but at the same time mysterious young man. She, on the other hand, was studying journalism and was known for her ability to strike up a conversation with anyone. Her openness and energy immediately attracted John. Since then, they became an inseparable couple, gathering many friends around them. After graduation, they got married and soon moved into a beautiful apartment in the city center. Bright rooms, decorated with love and careful attention to detail, created an atmosphere of warmth and comfort. John and Mia often invited friends over for dinner, and there was always an atmosphere of fun and joy in their home. Adulthood brought its own challenges, but John and Mia always supported each other. John built a career as an engineer, achieving success in a prestigious construction company, while Mia, setting ambitious goals for herself, quickly climbed the career ladder at the local newspaper, where she wrote articles touching on important social topics. Their union seemed unshakable, and their relationship a model of harmony. However, over time, clouds began to appear in their cloudless life. John began to notice small but persistent changes in his wife's behavior. At first, it seemed to him that it was just stress from work. Mia began to often stay late in the editorial office, justifying herself with a new wave of projects and deadlines that came one after another. Whereas before she might have unexpectedly suggested an evening stroll in the park, now she was more often immersed in her work and hardly noticed how the days passed. Weekends, which they used to devote to trips out of town or trips to exhibitions, were becoming increasingly rare. The emotional distance between them was becoming tangible. During dinner, Mia was often immersed in her phone, trying to isolate herself from the conversation. Her answers to questions became more and more brief and streamlined, as if she were keeping some secret. John was unaccustomed to his wife's reticence. He missed her cheerfulness, her conversations full of laughter and plans for the future. Sometimes he tried to strike up a conversation to see what was going on. "Is everything okay at work?" he asked, trying to pick a time when she didn't look tired. But Mia would reassure him, telling him that it was just a temporary hardship and everything would work out soon. Nevertheless, his intuition told John that it wasn't just about work. The feeling that something important was beginning to slip away was growing stronger every day, and he realized that their lives were on the threshold of big changes. John had always been proud of his and Mia's relationship. They had been together for more than a dozen years, and he sincerely considered their bond to be unbreakable. For others, their couple served as an example of that rare harmony, which is built on deep trust and mutual understanding. That's why the first change in Mia's behavior, her unexpected decision to set a password on her phone, came as a real shock to him. That night, when he first encountered this obstacle, John could not sleep for a long time. He lay in bed, half listening to the rain outside the window and trying to understand why he was suddenly feeling so anxious. After all, he had not yet encountered anything really serious, and yet his inner voice whispered inexorably about the coming changes. Maybe it's just paranoia, he reassured himself, trying to explain it away as a simple concern for data in an age of digital threats. But the paranoia wouldn't let go. Over time, John began to notice Mia's phone flickering in the semi-darkness of their bedroom more and more often. He pretended to be asleep so as not to betray his curiosity, but at that moment his mind was alert, analyzing every sound. It had never occurred to her to hide her phone before, but now she carried it into the bathroom or into the kitchen when she answered texts. John tried not to think the worst, but her behavior, which had seemed so clear and open before, was now as if hidden behind a veil of mystery. When John tried to ask about these later texts, Mia habitually smiled, shrugged softly, and talked about work issues or girlfriends in need of support. These explanations seemed logical, but his heart began to feel cold, and it was as if a slight shadow ran between them. Despite these alarming signals, the final shock came when their old friend Bob inadvertently mentioned meeting Mia at the cafe. It had all come out by chance, in a general chatter over a cup of cappuccino. John was suddenly taken aback to hear that his wife, who had assured him that she was late for work, had been seen having a light conversation with a stranger. Just a coworker, I guess, John tried to assure himself, but a devastating sense of deception settled in his soul. At home, left to himself, he could feel the disbelief gradually enveloping his reflections. All the memories and details took on a new, frightening significance. He remembered how recently he had found a handkerchief in their living room with the scent of someone else's perfume, thinking then that her friend must have forgotten it. Now the same thing suggested infidelity. John realized that this had to stop, but he couldn't muster the strength to talk. What if all his guesses were wrong, and his suspicions would only bring pain and destruction to their home? However, procrastination was intolerable. He realized that the truth might prove unpleasant and perhaps destroy his idea of the life he held so dear. Time passed, and soon the inevitable conversation was on the horizon. This conversation was going to reveal the whole truth, whatever it might be, and John realized that the main question now was not whether to take the first step, but when and how best to do it. John could not get rid of the disturbing feeling that an invisible barrier had come between him and Mia. Their conversations became short and superficial, and their glances became infrequent and distant. Her frequent delays at work made him suspicious, and on one of those days he decided that there was no point in tolerating it any longer. She said she'd be back late, and that was his cue to take action. John left work earlier than usual and headed towards Mia's office. He parked on the opposite side of the street, trying to remain unnoticed. Different thoughts were running through his head. What if he was wrong? But his intuition convinced him otherwise. While he waited, it seemed to him that time had slowed down. Inside him, he felt a contradiction between hope and fear. Finally, around 7 in the evening, Mia left the building. He watched her anxiously, hoping she would just head to her car. But to his surprise, she walked down the street on foot, looking around. John followed her at a respectful distance, trying not to give away his presence. She walked to a nearby cafe, where the stranger was already waiting. He was taller than average, with a confident posture and an inviting smile. It wasn't just a meeting, it was a real meeting of lovers. They exchanged warm greetings and sat down at the far table. John sat in the car, not taking his eyes off this duo. He watched them talk, laugh, and share with each other something deeper than just friendship. With every move they made, his suspicions were confirmed, and something inside him snapped. Returning home that evening, John felt his soul fill with heaviness. He realized that mere observation might not be enough, so he decided to take a more radical step. In his hands was her smartphone, accidentally left on the kitchen table. Without thinking twice, he quickly installed an app that allowed him to track messages and calls. His heart was pounding with tension because he knew he was crossing a line. In the following days, when Mia left for work, he checked the app. At first, the information was sparse, but soon he found what he was looking for. The correspondence frankly revealed details of their relationship, tender words, promises, and, most painfully, plans for the future. John read each message with the feeling of being betrayed over and over again. It was painful, but necessary. Realizing that the scraps of correspondence and observations were forming a clear picture, John realized that he needed to find out more. He searched for information about the alleged lover and found out that Michael was a businessman working in the same field as John. This gave him the opportunity to arrange a meeting under a business pretext. They chose a neutral place, a small cafe outside the city limits, where both of them could leave the hectic pace and concentrate on the conversation. John walked in there with tense thoughts, trying to remain calm and collected. Michael was already waiting at the table, nodding affably at his approach. At first glance, he turned out to be just as John had imagined him, charismatic and self-confident. At first, the conversation was businesslike. They discussed common projects and argued about the latest innovations in their industry, but John was determined to get to the point soon. After another pause, he finally broached the subject that had been waiting for him for so long. "I heard that you know my wife, Mia," he said, scrutinizing Michael's reaction. The man froze for a moment before replying, "Yes, we've met a few times. I didn't realize it would cause such repercussions." Then the conversation became tense, but at the same time frank. Michael, seeing John's anxiety, admitted that their relationship had started with friendly meetings, but had quickly grown into something more significant. He said that they had developed a mutual understanding and attraction, and they had decided that it was better to be together. Several days had passed since the first conversation with Michael, when John had learned the truth about his wife. Remembering every detail, he tried to correlate the events surfacing in his memory and realize how long he had lived in deception. At night he couldn't sleep, and during the day every little thing seemed to throw him off balance. The impatient anticipation of the final outcome and the realization of the need to resolve the matter were tearing him up inside. Mia didn't seem to notice anything, continuing to play the role of a caring wife. She smiled in the morning, prepared dinners, and, as before, shared the same living space with him, as if she did not aspire and did not go anywhere. For John, however, these small domestic scenes only acted as a reminder of her betrayal. And so, on Friday night, he suggested she spend the weekend out of town. His voice was calm and impassive, but in his heart he knew it would be a crucial trip. Mia was a little surprised at the offer, but accepted it, knowing how rare such opportunities were lately. As she packed her things, she imagined how a couple of days alone would help them fix everything, escape from everyday life, and regain the intimacy they'd lost. Early Saturday morning they left the city. The car headed confidently along the highway, cutting through the demi-seasonal air. John deftly maneuvered among the rare cars, keeping up a light conversation that didn't talk about anything or touch on any of the topics that bothered him. However, as they approached their destination, he could feel the tension building up inside him. He knew he had to stay calm in order to carry out his plan. As they turned onto the familiar road leading to Michael's house, his hands gripped the steering wheel tighter for a moment. Mia tensed impossibly, her eyes flashing with anxiety as she stared at the road. When they finally stopped in front of Michael's house, John felt his heart beat faster, but outwardly he remained unperturbed. He got out of the car, walked around it, opened the passenger door, and invited Mia out with a gesture that didn't bode well. Mia got out of the car, confused and wary. She looked around, but the familiar house didn't promise salvation. "What are we doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling, and he sensed the fear in her words. It was the fear he had guessed for so long, but now saw clearly. "Let's explain ourselves honestly," John said, pulling a smartphone out of his pocket. His movements were precise, like a soldier on a drill. His eyes reflected that calmness that becomes icy with emotion. Turning on the app, he turned the screen so she could see everything, every message, every photo, every trace of their cheating that she thought would disappear. A full set of evidence lay between them, inviting Mia to explain. Random. Daily meetings, multiple messages, and plans for the future are all random. His voice was quiet, but it held the hopelessness he'd been experiencing the past few days. Mia, shocked, tried to justify herself. It wasn't what you thought. It's prudence, but I didn't see it go that far myself." She couldn't take her eyes off the phone, as if it held her captive. John sighed, his eyes never taking his eyes off her face, trying to see in it the truth that had always been hidden from him. "Why didn't you just come to me and tell me the truth? There was no need to be afraid of me." His words didn't seem to reach her consciousness, shaking only the air between them. Mia took a step forward, her hands shaking, tears in her eyes that she couldn't hold back. "I was afraid I'd hurt you, that you'd never understand." Her voice broke as the truth came out like an evil spirit from a long-closed bottle. She lowered her gaze, covering her face with her hands. Dusk was thickening outside the window when John and Mia finally found the strength to sit down at the kitchen table and discuss something they had both tried to ignore. The situation was painful and disturbing. The silence that reigned in the room seemed palpable. John, struggling to contain the storm inside, began the conversation. His voice was calm, but full of suppressed despair. "Mia, we need to have an honest conversation. I need to understand why this happened," he said, tilting his head so he could see her face. He knew her confession could be crucial, but he was ready to hear the not-so-nice part. Mia tried to collect her thoughts, avoiding a direct gaze. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her words were in no logical order. "John," she began, her voice trembling and barely audible, "I realize this is no excuse, but I felt alone. It was like we were living separate lives. You were more and more absorbed in your work, and I was lost. lost in the routine and the everyday. She spoke slowly, sometimes stammering with excitement, but there was an extraordinary sincerity of past experience in her words. Mia told of how she had gradually drifted away from all that was dear to her, and withdrew into her own doubts and tormented feelings. The solace she had sought and found in other relationships had become something of an attempt to break the deadlock. John listened to her in silence, trying to comprehend all the nuances of what she said. Despite the resentment in his heart, he realized that this was only the tip of the iceberg, the reason that hid much more. He remembered how much he had changed, the career achievements, but the forgotten joys of simple moments with Mia. None of that, however, eased the pain of betrayal. Nevertheless, it was time to make a decision. John took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. "I'm grateful for your honesty, but I can't get past the betrayal," he said, each word delivering an internal verdict. "We must divorce. Perhaps in time it will be the best solution for both of us." The pause that followed those words was unbearably long. Mia realized that the picture of her dreams for the future was crumbling before her eyes. She nodded silently, knowing that the pinnacle of all the conflicts and uncertainties was her own decision that had led to this point. John had proposed a division of property, but now material issues seemed like mere trifles compared to the loss of the most important thing: trust. Moving out of the shared house was imminent for Mia. Every morning when she woke up and prepared for the change, she felt as if life was passing her by. The cardboard boxes in which she stacked her past became symbols of her new, unsettled life. Moving to a small apartment on the outskirts of the city emphasized the bitterness of separation. Now her days were filled only with her own company. The feeling of loss was ever present in her life. At first, the loneliness seemed unbearable, and she tried in vain to fill the void with things to do, to meet friends. However, over time, accepting reality, Mia began to believe that all this could be the beginning of something new. She realized that she had to learn to value herself, to seek inner support and encouragement. John stayed in their shared home, which now seemed empty and cold to him. He, too, had to start a new life, rethinking what had happened. It was a difficult process, but with each passing day he gained more and more clarity. As he contemplated the future, he maintained the hope that someday he would be able to trust again and be cherished with the feelings he valued most: love and respect. Months later, both were to heal from the trauma, each in their own way. And while time stood between their past and present, it also opened new horizons, lighting the way to the seemingly impossible: a new beginning. Epilogue. John, gathering all his strength and determination, left behind the pages of his life that had become a source of pain and disappointment. After a long time of reflection and introspection, he made an important decision: to move to a new city, which became for him a symbol of the beginning of a new life. This place, full of fresh possibilities, allowed him to free himself from the weight of the past and breathe the air of change. In the new city, John immersed himself in his work, which had always been not just a source of income for him, but also a stimulus for self-development. He actively participated in professional conferences and seminars, and met new people whose ideas and experience inspired him to take on new endeavors. Thanks to his determination and diligence, he quickly gained respect among his colleagues and became an example for many. Along with his professional successes, John found new hobbies for himself. He became an active participant in volunteer projects, which gave him the opportunity not only to help others, but also to find great personal meaning in it. At some point, it seemed that life was beginning to rebuild itself like a mosaic of disparate pieces. A year after the events that changed his life, John met a girl whose kindness and sincerity filled the void in his heart. They met by chance at a charity event, and with each subsequent conversation, John became convinced that something special connected them. This girl, with her warm gaze and clear aspirations, became his reliable support and friend. Their relationship was developing rapidly and organically, without tensions and doubts. John felt that in the person of this girl, he had found his true soulmate. Soon they decided to tie their fates officially, full of confidence that this union would last forever, based on mutual understanding, trust, and respect. For Mia, life has taken a completely different turn. Her world seems to have changed beyond recognition, and it's all through her own fault. She was once happily married, enjoying every day and planning for the future, but a fatal mistake cost her everything she valued. After her infidelity is revealed, Mia is on the verge of destruction. Her family life disintegrated like a house of cards, leaving behind only dust and fragments of former happiness. But the troubles did not end there. Soon she lost her job, which was not only a source of income for her, but also a part of her personality, defining her role in society. Mia tried to find a new job, but shame and insecurity haunted her at every step. Interviews were becoming an agonizing ordeal, as each rejection convinced her of her own worthlessness. The world she knew was shattered, and it seemed an impossible task to rebuild it. Against the background of all these events, Mia faced changes at the physical level. In the past, harmony in the body broke into a feeling of brokenness. She gained weight, and this became another reason for self-criticism and deepening into depression. The usual attention of men disappeared, and her well-being deteriorated. She felt that she had backed herself into a corner by destroying what she once held dear. In short, she had lost both her faith in people and her trust in herself. Remembering the past, Mia realized how great the price of her mistakes had been and how hard it was to fix what had been destroyed. As time passed, Mia began to think about how to regain some of her former life. She decided to attend therapy, hoping that through self-knowledge and self-acceptance, she would be able to find inner peace. Gradually, step by step, she planned to restore her own well-being and believed that one day she would be able to start anew, with a renewed understanding and a different attitude towards herself and others. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.